The number of companies demanding employees return to the office is rising. Amazon recently made headlines for mandating a 5-day in-office work week. But a recent survey found that 1 in 5 employees, listen to this, they admit to ignoring their company's return to office policy. Jessie Hempel is LinkedIn senior editor at large, and she joins us with more on this trend and what it means for you. So what have we done now? Because we've kind of reached a tipping point where now a lot of companies are telling their workers, come on back.
Well, you think it's a tipping point, but here's what I'm here to tell you. 4 years ago, we all had to learn how to work all of a sudden in a different way. And since that time, it feels to me like employers have been changing their minds, every 6 months?
Yeah, that's true.
But we are at that moment. We are at a moment where a lot of employers have said, okay, you got to come back. And a lot of us who are needing to go to those jobs every day, we're tired. And as you said, many of us are just not going to do it.
Welcome back to the Future of Work Weekly Report. This week, we're diving into a topic that's got corporate boardrooms and living rooms buzzing. Return to office mandates, RTO. Yep, that's right. The office is back. At least that's what companies like JP Morgan Chase and Amazon are insisting. But here's the question we need to answer. Does being back in the office actually make us more productive? Or are we just forcing square pegs into round holes? Spoiler alert, it's not just about where we work, it's about how we work. So let's get into why flexibility could be the answer that solves this messy RTO puzzle. Let's kick things off with the big push for RTO. You've probably heard it before, but now it's louder than ever. Get back in the office. Amazon, JP Morgan, the federal government. 54% of companies are caving into the pressures from high-profile players and government mandates. And while Jamie Dimon of JP Morgan is calling for a full-time return to the office, the truth is it really working? Or is it just creating resentment and employee burnout?
I have to ask about work from home. There have been a slew of headlines lately about what appears to be an internal debate within JP Morgan over the firm's 5-day-a-week in-office mandate, including a leaked audio recording from a town hall in Ohio that was obtained by Barron's. What's going on? What's going on with
Because I do town halls all around the world, and as you know, I moat sometimes. You've probably been in so many town halls. I should never curse, ever. That's okay. And I shouldn't get angry or stuff like that. And the gentleman asked a long question, and I answered the question. I try to give a lot of detail, which I think is titled to, but I've never ever fired anyone because they asked a question like that. I completely respect people that don't want to go to the office, all 5 days a week. That's your right, it's my right, it's a citizen's right. But they should respect that the company is going to decide what's good for the clients, the company, et cetera, not an individual. And so they can get a job, I'm not being mean, they get a job elsewhere. I understand that. It may make total sense for them to do that. And I also respect the fact that other companies are going to try a different way to grow. And I think there are a lot, we do have 10% of jobs that are full-time at home. We built these virtual call centers in Baltimore and Detroit. I'm not against work from home. I'm against where it doesn't work. And I gave all the reasons for that. And so, there's a petition, but maybe I forgot how many people signed, 1,200 people. That's fine. And they have the right to feel that way, but we're not going to change. We're going back to the office, and I'm sure when we do, there'll be some seats not available. But for the most part, most of our people understand why we need to do it.
According to a recent study by Top Resume, 17% of employees say they'll pack up and leave if their company forces them to clock in 5 days a week like we used to. That's not exactly the return to normal companies were hoping for. Sure, some employees are fine with it. In fact, 80% say RTO policies are fairly fair. But here's the twist. 30% are secretly job hunting because of RTOs. So while the RTO mandate might seem fair on paper, how long can employees be okay with flexible schedules that only go one way? office to desk to coffee machine. Not too long, apparently. So why are these RTO mandates being pushed in the first place? Is it because companies are suddenly worried about productivity? Or is it because leaders are addicted to the idea of controlling what happens in the office?
We begin with Elon Musk doubling down on his ultimatum to federal workers to explain what they did last week or face termination. Our senior political correspondent, Rachel Scott, had the very latest on the mixed messages being sent to some employees. Good morning, Rachel.
Michael, good morning. Mixed messages, to say the least. This is becoming whiplash for federal workers. The president and Elon Musk saying that those workers who did not respond to that email listing their accomplishments would be fired or semi-fired. But then the president's own administration directly contradicted him. And so all of this really raising questions about which guidance federal employees should be listening to. This morning, federal workers in limbo after confusing and contradictory guidance about that ultimatum and midnight deadline from billionaire Elon Musk, saying employees must respond to an email with a list of what they did last week or lose their job. The president calling that idea genius, saying those who don't answer would be semi-fired or fired.
By asking the question, tell us what you did this week, what he's doing is saying, are you actually working? And then if you don't answer, like, you're sort of semi-fired or you're fired.
But just as the president weighed in, his own administration gave conflicting information. The Office of Personnel Management told agencies the request was voluntary and that workers don't have to respond. The FBI, the Pentagon, and the Justice Department had already told workers to hold off. The Department of Health and Human Services sent competing messages, at first telling employees to respond to the email, then 6 hours later telling them not to respond. And finally telling workers they can respond if they want to, but warning they should assume that what you write will be read by malign foreign actors and tailor your response accordingly. But at least 6 other agencies, including the Treasury Department, telling employees it is required.
I have no problem with the employees here saying, what did you do last week? And if you can't come up with 5 things that you did, maybe you shouldn't be employed here.
According to Emily Farrick in Bevy's survey, employees have their reasons: productivity, collaboration, and career growth. But let's be honest, how many of us are really dying to sit in an office when we could be more productive from home, free from distractions and that one colleague who doesn't understand personal space? You know who you are. Employees aren't saying, I hate the office. They're saying, I don't mind the office, but do I need to come in every day to feel valued? And for some, it's all about the commute. 50% of employees said their commute is the deal breaker. So while office space is meant to foster collaboration, is it really just a glorified waiting room for those who need to clock in for their boss's sake?
RTO mandates did not deliver the expected productivity boost or financial performance gain. Does the latest research data back that up?
It does. It's been a really interesting few months because for a while there, it seemed like this topic was calming down a bit. But what's happened since is things have gotten heated up again. So back in March when I wrote that article, one of the studies that I talked about was one from Mark Mott of the University of Pittsburgh that said that firms that put mandates in place showed no financial performance benefit over the ensuing year. It did have a knock-on effect on employee engagement. Since that, Nick Bloom had a study that came out in Nature that said that hybrid work is equally productive in the measurement they did with one company, but had a very positive effect on retention of employees relative to being full-time in the office. There's a study that came out of a combination of professors at Cornell and University of Utah. They did a similar set of analyses around financial performance and found that there was not even a stock market benefit. Some CEOs, I think, are expecting to get a pop. Wall Street rewarding them for getting tough on employees. It turns out that doesn't happen either. And then there's been studies that have come out of both McKinsey and BCG showing that firms that are more flexible actually result in higher revenue growth on top of it. It's a bit of the unitary CEO saying that this is the way I want us to work and not getting a reward for it from a financial perspective.
Top-down decision, little reward.
Top-down decision, little reward. To no reward, to negative consequences for their employees. Longer term, we'll see how this plays out.
Interesting data. Amazon recently imposed a strict return to office mandate for its employees that will take effect in January of 2025. Dell recently ordered its sales staff in the Austin area back to the office immediately.
Yeah.
Employees immediately started voicing their displeasure about these decisions online.
Yeah.
Why is there such a continuing disconnect between the CEOs and the employees on this issue?
Yeah, it's a shame that there is such a disconnect because we tend to polarize this into either everybody wanting full-time in the office or full-time remote, when the vast majority of people want regular time together with their teams. We can come back to that about how you make that happen. But those disconnects are pretty fundamental sometimes. What you're seeing is some CEOs who are making decisions on the basis of what they think is right for an entire company, a large-scale organization that's actually distributed across multiple locations and functions around the globe. That person may be making that decision on the basis of what was right for them as they grew up and went through the system, what made them successful, and often forget that they may not look like what the rest of their employee base looks like in terms of, for example, caregiving responsibilities. But there are ways to do this that other firms have figured out how to do, which is don't put that nexus of decision-making at the executive level to make a unitary one-size-fits-all decision, but also don't leave it to individual chaos. Business units, functions, and teams are the right place to put that decision. If you get a team working together and talking about why we should come together, what types of activities and events are best done in person, you get a higher level of satisfaction, a higher level of engagement, according to research done by BCG, and you get people that feel like they are involved in the conversation, which means they feel like they are trusted.
Let's talk about companies that are actually doing it right. Take Canva, for example. They're not forcing mandates. They're embracing flexibility. And 57% of their employees show up to the office at least once a week. But it's on their terms. And that's where things get interesting. The real secret here is that Canva isn't locking down their employees in a rigid schedule. They're giving them control. Employees can choose where they work based on what's best for their work-life balance. And guess what? This is leading to engagement, better performance, and long-term loyalty. When's the last time you've heard that? So why are companies like JP Morgan Chase still pushing for full-time office attendance? It can't be because they have an investment in a huge real estate for their headquarters. No, it can't be that. But here's the thing. Flexibility isn't just a perk anymore. It's a necessity. Employees who feel trusted to decide how they work, whether remotely or in the office, are more engaged. Empowered workers aren't showing up just because they're forced to. They show up because they want to. Big difference. Now, let's get real for a second. The key issue with RTO mandates isn't about where people work. It's about how we're supporting them. Leadership needs to shift its mindset from being commanders to being coaches.
Okay, so teams are working more, they are accomplishing less. How does a team break out of that cycle? What kinds of norms do they need to adopt to do that?
Well, our research shows us that there are 3 kinds of behaviors that teams really need to embrace in order to be effective. And the first is that they need to replace most meetings. So teams are using meetings as a way to manage an enterprise worth of information. And we need teams to stop playing telephone and start using tooling to make the right information visible and available to everyone. That means that they need to start using a culture of writing and get more comfortable with asynchronous communication in order to make that a reality. They can then use the time that they save by breaking free of meetings to do focused, creative, and difficult work, either individually or in groups. The next thing is that teams really need to know what matters. And today it seems like they don't. Because when we spoke to Fortune 500 executives, they told us that only 24% of their teams are doing mission critical work. And that's just not enough. To solve that, organizations need goal setting, habits and norms that make it clear to teams as well as their collaborators about what work matters right now. And similarly, individuals need to develop daily practices to understand what matters today and how do I design my day to achieve that. And then finally, it's really about core work. That third behavior is about progressing core work, because right now teams are focused way too much on talking about work and managing work than they are on actually doing the work. And we found that when teams at Atlassian reorganize their calendars to really be focused on the core priorities, instead of just showing up to their workday with a graveyard of requests for their time from other people and letting their calendar dictate their day, that 68% of them were more likely to make progress on their weekly and daily priorities. And that's a big number.
Annie Dean from Atlassian put it perfectly. It's not about where people work. It's about how they work. Managers, listen up. If you're still hung up on having bodies in seats, you're missing the point entirely. It's about making work streams visible, communication clearer, and support more meaningful. At Atlassian, they've mastered the hybrid model and they're leading the way. But it's not just about whether you're in the office or remote. It's about creating an environment where employees feel connected and empowered, whether they're dialing in from a home office or meeting face-to-face in a company hub. And most importantly, it's working.
Culture change is some of the hardest work that leaders have to do. What first steps do you suggest for a leader who wants to help their organization move from a culture of measuring productivity via FaceTime to measuring productivity via outcomes?
Yeah, the first thing is you need to know what outcomes you're trying to measure, right? So I've actually seen this in organizations. It's really hard. There's an executive wrestling match that needs to happen, which is what goals are most important to us? What are our priorities? How are we going to articulate these in measurable ways? If you put people in a position where what you're saying to them or signaling to them is, what matters to me is whether or not you're showing up, your activity. How many hours a day are you in the office? How many hours a day is your green light on showing that you're active online? Then people will perform to that metric, right? That means you're not getting them focused on the outcomes. And the reason they're doing that is you're not giving them the trust to actually, deliver against the problems that they're facing. That's a doom loop, right? I'm monitoring your activity, therefore you don't trust me, therefore I'm not going to focus on the root cause at hand, I'm just going to sort of punch the clock, therefore performance degrades. And it keeps going around and around. If instead you can have that conversation about what are the goals and outcomes, how do we actually measure people at the team level against that, and in some cases to the individual level against that? How do we hold people accountable to performance, not to activity? What you're saying is, I trust you to hit the outcome. I'm going to give you more degrees of freedom and latitude to get there, but I expect you to actually perform, right? That's really important in terms of lifting their levels of engagement. You're boosting trust. They actually perform better. That aligns with the organization's goals overall, and it's a positive boom loop instead of a negative doom loop.
And many of us feel that during the pandemic, we proved it could work.
Yes.
Measuring to outcomes.
So here's the bottom line. RTO mandates aren't the future of work. Flexibility is. Hybrid work models are the key to a future where employee autonomy and productivity can thrive simultaneously. It's not about forcing people back into the office to meet arbitrary attendance quotas. What does that do? It's about offering choice, trust, and support. Companies that offer that are the ones that will retain top talent and keep their employees engaged long term. So next time you hear about a company enforcing a full-time office mandate, ask yourself, is this really what's best for the business? Or is it just a way to hold on to the past?
So, but that's what's interesting, right? Because people hear back to office, starting Monday, everyone's going to go back. And instead of taking it as like the gospel, you must follow this rule or you're gone, people kind of skirt it, right?
Well, they do that. And I'm just going to tell you, they should do that at their own risk.
Okay, that was my question. Right? Are these companies really serious about it or not?
Well, we know that the companies are very serious about it. That does not mean that people don't have some flexibility here, but that needs to begin with a conversation with your manager, not just a choice that you make on your own. And here's why. We know that there are fewer and fewer jobs available. The LinkedIn platform will tell you in North America, in the US this year, right now, about 20% of the job openings are remote and hybrid jobs. That is fewer than last year. There is more competition for those jobs.
Right.
So if you ignore your employer and you find yourself out of job, it's not like you're going to go out and easily find a replacement that's a remote job.
Right. And research has also shown that the people who are impacted more are women are disproportionately impacted by having to go back to work. What can you
Well, what we know is that women are more often caregivers. And these rules can be very hard for many people who have, over the last 4 years, figured out how to make their life work by having, say, a shorter commute or the flexibility to drop out in the middle of the day and pick up their kids. Now we're having to figure that out all over again.
Yeah, there's an opportunity here from a business perspective, though, I imagine, for smaller companies to say, hey, we'll take your flex work. Come here. You're talented. We need you.
That is exactly right. And you will find, by the way, you will find more of these hybrid jobs, these remote jobs, if you're looking at international employers, if you are looking at these smaller companies. And it is a great way for a smaller company to be competitive. It's trying to land the big talent.
Can I play devil's advocate here?
Please do.
Because I do think that there's a productivity increase when people can work from home and manage their own time.
Is that it? Well, I'm curious. Is that a fact or a theory? I don't even know.
I experienced that when I was working from home as a correspondent. You can, first of all, you save time on having to travel, but there's a lot of socializing that happens at work, which I love, and then I end up chatting for like 20 minutes before I know it. So what about that part of this?
I wish I could give you a definitive on that. And I agree with you. I think a lot of people are discovering right now in going back to work that they're exhausted at the end of the day because they have to build up that muscle that is just like talking to more people, seeing more people over the course of the day. But to your point, does that translate into productivity? I think it kind of depends on the work that you do. I mean, I'm a writer, so when I am not with you, I'm trying to be deep in my head, having long thoughts. It's really great to be at home. But there's a lot of kind of work that doesn't work that way, right?
Yeah. Flexibility isn't just a buzzword anymore. It's the key to a better future of work. Think about it. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time, where the only thing we mandate is flexible thinking and open minds. Thank you.